Hello and welcome. We are jumping right into this explainer on Chapter 7 from the brilliant text, Assessment for Language Teaching by Egg and Constant Lewing. I'm your host, an educator and language assessment specialist. Today, we're unpacking a true masterclass on the quality aspects of assessment. Our ultimate goal here? Developing what we call language assessment literacy. Basically, that means empowering ourselves to make informed, highly effective, and ethical decisions about how we assess our students. And joining me to navigate all of this are two absolutely wonderful colleagues.
Hi, everyone. I'm a postgraduate TESOL student, and I am so ready to connect these big theories to my own developing practice.
Hey there, I'm an early career language teacher. I'm really here to figure out how to take all these high-level concepts and actually make them work in the messy reality of an everyday classroom. Let's dive right in. To keep us anchored today, we've actually distilled this entire chapter down to 3 big takeaways. First up, achieving quality in assessment isn't just about finding one single perfect metric. It's really about balancing multiple competing criteria. Second, assessment doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It is highly contextual and deeply social. And third, the way we design tests inherently shapes how students learn, which is a phenomenon known as washback. We'll be referring back to these throughout our explainer today. So, here is our roadmap. We'll start with an introduction to quality criteria, then move into reliability and validity, followed by practicality and assessment. After that, we'll look at ethics and fairness scenarios, explore impact and washback, and finally wrap up with building assessment literacy. Starting us off, Section 1, Introduction to Quality Criteria. As Egg and Constant Lewing emphasize, ensuring quality in our assessments is really about making sure they are fit for their intended purpose. They map out 6 specific criteria: reliability, validity, practicality, ethics, fairness, and impact. The absolute most important thing to understand here is that these are completely interrelated. They aren't just isolated checkboxes. Think of it like a giant conceptual puzzle. If you push too hard on one piece, say making a test highly practical and cheap, you might accidentally compromise another piece, like validity. This framework really serves as our compass for the rest of the explainer. Moving right along to Section 2, reliability and validity. Now, these two concepts are the core psychometric and edgeometric foundations of literally any assessment. I know they sound like heavy academic jargon, but their purpose is incredibly practical. Let's start with reliability. This is all about consistency and trustworthiness. Simply put, if a student takes the exact same test multiple times under the exact same conditions, they should get a consistent result. It means the assessment is dependable. If our scoring fluctuates wildly depending on the day of the week or the person grading it, well, we don't have reliability, and our data just cannot be trusted. Next up, we have construct validity. This asks a really crucial question. Are we actually measuring what we claim to be measuring? Because language abilities like fluency or reading comprehension are abstract constructs. We can't physically hold them in our hands. Yes, and this is a point that really stood out to me in the text. The authors use such a great example. Imagine using a multiple-choice grammar test and then trying to use those scores to infer a student's actual speaking skills. That test completely lacks construct validity, because simply recognizing grammar rules on a piece of paper does not equate to the ability to speak fluently in a real-time conversation.
That is a perfect illustration. And that naturally leads us to the second type of validity, content validity. This is really focused on the concept of sufficiency. To make a fair, evidence-based decision about a student's ability, we have to gather an adequate amount and quality of responses. One single vocabulary question isn't nearly sufficient to evaluate someone's entire lexical range, right? We need enough of the right kind of evidence to make that call. And finally, there's face validity. This one is fascinating because it's not strictly a statistical measure. It's really about public acceptance and trust. Does the test actually look like a valid assessment to the students taking it, the teachers administering it, and the parents reviewing it? If the stakeholders don't trust the test, they simply won't engage with it seriously, which totally impacts both standardized testing and our daily classroom assessments.
All right, bringing us to Section 3, practicality in assessment.
So this is exactly where all that abstract theory collides head-on with the messy logistics of my daily life as a teacher. The crucial point here is the constant trade-off we face. Look, as teachers, ideally we crave maximum evidence. We want complex, lengthy assessments that show us exactly what our students can do in rich detail. But the reality? Those take a massive amount of time to develop, administer, and mark. On the flip side, shorter assessments, like a really quick multiple choice quiz, are incredibly time efficient. But, thinking back to what we just talked about, they often lack the sufficient scope needed for content validity. We are always balancing our desire for perfect data against the very real constraints of time, money, and, quite frankly, teacher burnout.
Which brings us to Section 4, Ethics and Fairness Scenarios.
Ethics encompass our broad educational responsibilities as professionals, while fairness focuses much more specifically on the impartial treatment of all our students. Let's look at a specific scenario pulled straight from Chapter 7 to see how these two concepts intertwine. Okay, imagine this classroom case. Your school principal suddenly mandates a standardized computer-based test for the final exams. The principal basically wants the school to look tech-savvy and save some time on marking. But here is the massive problem. Many of your students lack basic computer skills. They come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds where they don't have tech access at home. And to top it all off, the test content completely lacks alignment with what you've actually been doing in the classroom.
So this brings us to a major dilemma. Seriously, if you were the teachers in this exact scenario, what would you do? Well, this one really made me pause and critically reflect. On one hand, speaking up against the principal poses a very real career risk, especially for an early career teacher. But ethically, remaining silent means complicity in a system that is fundamentally unfair. Those students are going to fail, not because of their language proficiency, but because the test format itself is an unaccommodated barrier. It really highlights why advocating for fair accommodations isn't just a nice thing to do, it's an ethical responsibility.
Now for Section 5, Impact and Washback. That was beautifully said. And, when assessments are implemented, whether they are fair or completely unfair, they leave a wake behind them. Impact is the broad effect an assessment has on individuals and society at large. But within our specific field, we really focus on something called washback. This is defined as the influence of tests on teaching and learning. Think of it literally like waves washing back onto the shore from a passing boat. High-stakes tests inevitably wash back into the classroom, directly shaping what teachers choose to teach and what students choose to study. And we can clearly see the two totally different directions washback can take. Positive washback happens when a test actually encourages good pedagogical practices. For example, if a final test requires a live speaking interview, teachers and students are going to spend class time actually practicing speaking, a skill that successfully transfers to their future careers. Negative washback, however, occurs when learning is curtailed just to fit the test format. If the final exam is a rigid multiple-choice grammar test, we see cramming. Students just memorize isolated rules to pass, which totally restricts their ability to actually communicate in real life. Finally, Section 6, Building Assessment Literacy.
Recognizing those intended and unintended outcomes is exactly what makes us professionals. The entire purpose of understanding reliability, validity, fairness, and washback is to empower ourselves.
Exactly. Looking back, we can confidently say we've hit our initial 3 takeaways. We've seen that quality demands a really balanced framework. You literally can't have practicality without considering validity. We've also learned that fairness is deeply tied to context and providing the right accommodations. And finally, we just saw how test design directly shapes learning through washback.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this provocative thought directly from Reflection Box 6 in the text. Choose just one of the quality criteria we covered today: reliability, validity, practicality, ethics, fairness, or impact. Think about a specific classroom assessment you use right now. How would you apply the principles of that criterion to improve your practice? Because ultimately, assessment is not just a measurement tool. It is a profound educational responsibility. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpacked Chapter 7. Keep reflecting, keep questioning, and we will absolutely see you next time.